So I'm going to assume that because you're watching this video, you are considering or you just started running ads for the first time for your info product or for your client's info product. And trust me, I've been there. It can be scary because you don't want to burn your own money, you don't want to burn your client's money, and overall it can be stressful. That's exactly why I'm making this video. This video is going to be everything from A to Z that you could possibly ever need to know to start running ads for your info product or your client's info product, and ultimately condense the time that it's going to take for this to become very profitable to you to being as little time as possible. Because at the end of the day, cracking paid traffic for your offer or adding it to your arsenal if you're a service provider is one of the most powerful things that you could do. So in this video, I'm gonna show you exactly how you can do it. Let's go right into it. So yeah, guys, this video is gonna be a full A to Z guide of everything I wish I knew before I started running ads for info products and everything that you need to know before you start running ads for your info product or for your client's info product. Genuinely, I'm not trying to hype this up too much, but I would have paid thousands, if not tens of thousands of dollars for this video before I started running ads because it would have made my learning curve so much easier. So let's get right into it. So first, I want to get into some realistic expectations off the bat. So number one, you have to understand that you're buying data here, and this might be a gradual process. Like realistically, I give myself the mental timeline of like 30 to 60 days from a new client launch till the point where they're at like a healthy ROAS, which I would consider like above a 3x cash on cash. And I'm very clear about that with the offer owner. I'm very transparent about that. I'm like, look, my goal here is to like break even or get you slightly profitable within the first like 15 to 30 days and then just keep going from there. But there is going to be a gradual process here. With that being said, if you follow everything within this video and iterate quickly, a realistic timeline to having healthy profit margins off of paid is 30 to 90 days, in my opinion. And this is probably a little bit easier if you're already running to a warm audience and if the creator has already been making a bunch of money off of organic, because you already have some idea of what works with your audience and what doesn't. So next thing, my recommended test budget, obviously there's nuance that goes into this. If you're doing $500,000 a month already, start way higher than this, but I would say this is like realistic baseline is $700 to $1,000 a day minimum for 30 days, which is around a 20 to 30K test budget. And that's specifically if I'm running to a call funnel. I'll explain why later. Realistically, the odds that you burn through 100% of this money, if you follow everything in this video and actually iterate quickly, are very low. A realistic worst case scenario is you put up 20 or 30 grand and you maybe lose 20 to 30%. I would say more often than not, if your sales team is decent and if you're very quick to iterate on things, you can be slightly above break even. But I'm just trying to like paint the picture that running ads is not this scary thing. There's a very like small chance that you put up 30 grand and you actually evaporate most of it. So like I said, in case you're scared or you're getting cold feet, you have to understand the value of adding consistency and stability to your offer. It's worth the testing process like 100 times over. And you have to understand that everyone will inevitably have to pivot to paid because no one, and like even like the imams of the world, maintains their peak organic numbers for more than 2 to 3 years max. I would say most people, it's like probably half of that. So if you're crushing with organic right now, it's better to do it when things are going well and you have some additional profit that you can reinvest into the paid side of things and amplify your results on organic rather than waiting until the well goes completely dry and then trying to do it in a panic. Last thing, everyone who's crushing with organic should be leveraging paid media in some way because having an organic presence makes it so much easier to see success with paid. So when I say everyone who's crushing with organic, what I mean is like you should at bare minimum be running the hammer them for all of your pre-call stuff and potentially like some low spend retargeting, like maybe 10 to 20K a month that will probably be very profitable for you. But my belief is that literally everyone who's doing well with organic should be leveraging paid media in some way. And if you have no organic and you're launching straight cold, this video will help you condense your timeline for success 100%. So let's get into what you need to do before you ever launch. It's very important that you do all this before you spend $1 on paid ads. So here's everything you need to have built out for a VSL call funnel. Obviously for a webinar funnel or for a low ticket funnel or DM funnel, this will be completely different. But you need to have a VSL that's built for cold traffic. So what I mean by that is, let's say right now you're running like a warm traffic VSL where it's all too organic and the people already kind of know who you are and they kind of already know what the business model is and you're more so selling them on your mechanism, your results, etc. It's a little bit more direct. You have to adapt that VSL for cold traffic. You want to be able to take someone who's completely unaware to the point where they can become a customer. Next thing, you need a landing page. The basic structure that we run is just headline, VSL, application, social proof, and you can potentially test sections underneath that have content. Next thing you have to have built out is multiple proven angles to test through. I would say on average, I'd like to have 2 or 3 batches of 10 different messaging angles. So what I mean by that is, like, let's say you're running an Airbnb offer. Maybe you run one angle to people who are in their corporate 9 to 5 and they want to have a side stream of income. One angle is like people who are retired and they want to generate some, semi-passive income on the side. And then the next angle is like someone who wants to leave their 9 to 5. Here's how much you have to make with Airbnbs to replace that. Something like that, but you want to have 3 different messaging angles that you can test through, just so that way you're not having to completely put everything on hold if you decide that one angle isn't going to work. You want to have multiple angles on it. Next thing you want to have is a properly built application funnel with the self-liquidating offer and then conditional logic that pushes to that. So what I mean by that is, let's say you have someone come through the application. If they answer like, I have less than $1,000 to invest, you reroute them to like a $27 or a $47 product. And then obviously all the purchasers from that, you're going to have setters dial. That's honestly super important, just capturing something, even if it's $50, because a lot of those people are potential upsells. Next thing is you need to have your sales team dialed and you need to quality check everything constantly. Another thing that I think I put later on is you have to really set the expectation with your sales team that these are going to be very different leads than what they're used to, and they cannot be stubborn and complain about it, because you just have to understand, you have to really paint the picture for the sales team that, like, look, if you want consistent volume, consistent packed calendars every single day, this is a gradual process that we're all going through together. So I need you guys to cooperate, give me really good feedback, and really just be open-minded and don't complain about these leads. Next thing you have built out is all the pre-call processes. So that's all the pre-call emails, SMS reminder flows, etc. Confirmation page. So that just has like the thank you video, all the FAQ videos underneath that, the hammer them ads, and then you want to have proper tracking set up, Hyros and lead file. I'll talk a little bit more about those in a second, but all of this stuff is 100% necessity to have set up just to help your odds of seeing quick success with paid ads. One important overarching thing to understand is that your disadvantage when you start running paid ads is your lack of context and data around what works for you and what works for your specific approach. So the way to skew the odds of success back into your favor is to have all of these boxes checked and build out your infrastructure properly before you ever put $1 of spend through it. So essentially, you just don't want to have all of these things that are kind of being done half right and like so. You really want to make sure that everything is built out properly, go the extra mile to make sure you're confident in every single thing on this list, because at the end of the day, you're kind of flying blind with no data, so you need to essentially stack the deck back in your favor. Okay, so the next concept that I want to go over here is the idea that your success or lack of success with paid ads is about 40% dependent on what's going on inside of the ads manager. So that's like your creatives, the targeting, the campaign structure, etc. And about 60% dependent on the infrastructure that you're running the ads to. So that's everything from the landing page, the VSL, the copy on those, and the congruency with what's going on the ad side, the pre-call process, the sales team approach, the sales team skill level, etc. You won't have success if you have massive issues on either side, but it's so important to understand that having success with paid ads is so much more than having like a perfect creative or a perfect campaign structure. It's a holistic approach. So the point I'm trying to make here is, like, I feel like so many people, and I kind of had this too, have this misconception that's all about the buttons that you click in the ads manager. What I would say is it's like 40-60. Like, if you mess up really bad in the ads manager, you're going to lower your odds of success. But at the same time, you can have the best approach in terms of everything you're doing in the ads manager, and then the infrastructure can just be, terrible, and your results are still going to be really bad. So you need to have both at least at a decent level, but you need to understand that there's 2 different sides to this. And again, it's like this yin and yang. Like, you can't have success while doing a bunch of things wrong in the ads manager, but you also can't have success by messing everything up in the process and the infrastructure. So I'm going to go over some best practices to boost your odds of quick success. So number 1 is just to financial model everything out. So like I always say, you have to understand what success looks like to have any chance at ever hitting it. So what we do is, before we ever launch a single campaign, we're going to financial model out our worst case scenario, like a tolerable scenario, and then our best case scenario. And we're going to go over just all the big KPIs. So your CPMs, your link click-through rates, your page view to qualified book call percentage, cost per call, how many calls you keep, the show rate, the close rate, average cash per call. Those are just like the big KPIs, and there's obviously things underneath that. But essentially what I want to do is, I already want to have some idea of what I'm shooting for across the board. So that way, right out of the gate, I can tell what the performance is and what I think is going to happen. But then also I can clearly see what's going wrong and what needs to be changed. Like I said before, this is a game of constant iteration. So if you already have some kind of idea as like all of your baseline KPIs, you can easily spot what's going wrong. That's going to help you iterate so much quicker, which is going to help you find success so much quicker. Okay, so the next thing to understand, this is kind of going off of the financial model, is you need to understand the KPIs at each step of the funnel and be pretty cutthroat about monitoring and maintaining KPIs. So I'm going to go through the entire process. So essentially, first, you're going to have your traffic. Obviously, you're running them to your ads. So what I like to look for is around a $30 to $50 CPM. Again, there's nuance to this. So like if yours is a little higher, a little lower, don't freak out. $30 to $50 is around what we see typically. You want to have your click-through rate above 1%. And you want to have your messaging actually aligned with the ideal ICP. You don't want to artificially inflate your numbers with super clickbaity stuff. So like if you tell someone in the ad that you're like giving away $1,000 to someone who fills out the type form on the next page, like obviously you're going to have a high click-through rate. So you don't want to run these like super gimmicky ads, at least in my experience, because it just attracts a low quality prospect. Next kind of batch of KPIs that you're looking for is you want 3 to 5% of the people who hit the page to be a qualified book call. So let's say 100 people hit the page, you'd be looking for around 3 to 5 qualified book calls off of that. You want the VSL to be consumed at around a 25% engagement rate. You can see the statistics on softwares like Wistia. You want to see no major application drop-off. So you don't want to see like one question where like 50% of people drop off or like 70% of people drop off. You want it to be kind of consistent. And even the ones that you see have the most drop-off, you want to play with those questions and potentially delete them just to help get as many submitted applications of the people who start as possible. And then the main thing here is the cost per call. So obviously the cost per call is going to vary from niche to niche. Like if you have some super specialized B2B offer versus like some super broad B2C offer, it's going to be way different. But you essentially just want to model out all of the different cost per calls on the financial model. So you want to do like a worst case scenario, a tolerable scenario, and the best case scenario, like I said, and then just make sure that your cost per call is somewhere within those KPIs. The next big batch of KPIs you want to look at is around 70 to 80% of the calls that are being booked are not being canceled, and these people are relatively responsive. So you're always going to have some people who just fall off the face of the earth, never respond to anything, and then you're also going to have a handful of people who are unqualified and you end up canceling the calls. But we want to keep around 70 to 80%. And then we want to have around a 40 to 50% show rate on the remaining calls that are left after cancellations. And then we want to be sure that this is more of a qualitative thing, that the leads are like relatively bought in on why they're showing up to the call, like they're higher intent. Obviously, there's plenty of things you can do in this process to get the intent up, but you don't want these people showing up to the call and having zero idea why they're there, because it's just going to be very hard for your sales team to close them. Last big batch of KPIs we're looking at is around a 25 to 30% close rate of showed calls. A high cash per call, so I would say around 70 to 80% of the PIF price ideally. So if the offer price is $5,000, we want to see a cash per call of around $4,000. And then we want to liquidate around 25 to 30% of ad spend from downsells. So it's just 25 to 30% of what we spend. We want to recoup that off of downsells and stuff like that. So hopefully everything makes sense there. Let's keep it moving. So the next best practice that I want to go over is maintaining congruency throughout the entire customer journey. So especially when you're starting out, like I said, you're at a disadvantage because you have a lack of context or data around what works for you. So you need to make up for it with dialed in messaging. And the way that I like to think about this is even if you have a decent personal brand, you want the messaging to be so precise and dialed in that people would buy from you even if they had no idea who you were prior. So this is an example. I always see their ads. And I know that this offer crushes because I see their ads so often, but their ICP is high net worth men. So if you go through their funnel, all of their ads are only speaking to high net worth men. Like in some of the ads, his hook is literally like, if you're pulling in over $250,000 a year, but you're embarrassed to take your shirt off at the pool. Like they really lean into their ICP and they really only sell to high net worth men. And I've literally seen like landing pages where they say, if you make less than X, like just straight up leave the page. Like this is not for you. So with that being said, their ads, their landing pages, their VSLs, their thank you pages, I'm sure, pre-call emails, pre-call sales automations, and even stuff in their closing framework. Obviously, I haven't been on a call with them, but I'd imagine that all of it is super congruent to their ICP of high net worth men. And they're using little things in the verbiage and just little things that they're doing throughout the sales process that they understand that high net worth men will be more responsive to and will resonate more with. And this is a prime example of what congruency looks like, hence why they crush cold traffic. So their ICP is in mind at every single step of the funnel. They're talking about the #1 fitness company in the world for high net worth men. And what they're doing here is because they're so dialed in on their messaging, obviously their pixel is being conditioned by the constant data points of people within their ICP that are qualified hitting it, which just means over time the pixel becomes more and more conditioned to go and find their ICP time and time again, which is I'm sure why they have so much success with cold traffic. So the next best practice is monitoring your sales team efficiency and standards. So like I said before, you can do everything perfectly on the front end and still get terrible results if your sales team isn't in check. So you need to set expectations with the sales team up front about the learning curve on these leads, and they just have to understand this is going to be a process. Don't get frustrated if these people don't know who the creator is or don't understand the business model, and don't just disqualify these people. We still have to work with what we can do. Speed to lead is an absolute non-negotiable. Every single person who applies, who's unqualified or qualified, has to be getting called and texted within 10 minutes, absolutely non-negotiable. The next thing is you need to quality check everything on the sales team side, like all the pre-call texts, all the automations, all the setter frameworks and scripts, etc. Essentially, you just want to like foolproof the entire process, because there's so many little things that you might not think are significant or you might not be paying attention to that could just be killing your show rate, killing the amount of calls that you're actually canceling that aren't unqualified, all these different things. Another thing I want to mention is that when we launch a new team, I'm getting excessive amounts of feedback from the sales team, so I know it's a change on the front end. So it's to the point where like I'll hit the setters up like every other day and I'll be like, hey, how are the ads leads from yesterday? How are the ads leads from the day before? Because I want to hear constant feedback about how the leads are, commonalities I can see between the different leads, etc. And you also might need to train them about how to actually give helpful feedback. So we want really tight communication loops. So essentially what I mean by that is I don't just want to hear were they qualified or were they unqualified. I want to hear, oh, like this person I disqualified because of this. This person had this misconception about the business model. This person thought that the offer was actually this thing. Because that gives me very tactical feedback that I can go and fix on the front end, so that way we reduce the commonalities of people who are like that. So the next best practice I want to go over is that little tweaks at scale make a big difference, and this is more of a principle. So things like getting the show rate up, getting the number of PIFs or cash collected per close up, having a variety of financing options and being able to sell more people into the program, cleaning up 20 to 30% of ad spend with downsells, testing new landing pages that have gradual increases in conversion rates, optimizing the application structure and minimizing the drop-off, all these little things, they might be marginal tweaks alone, but compounded on top of each other, these make a massive difference at scale. And the way I think about this mentally is like, okay, if I can get, my ROAS up like 2% here, 4% here, 6% here, it's like, that's how you make those big moves over time. Whereas like, it's very easy to let these little things fall through the cracks. And then it's like eventually it's just death by a million paper cuts. So my main focus is just doing as much as I possibly can to get this to work as quick as possible. Again, if you're launching paid for your offer for the first time, you need to do literally everything within your control to stack the deck in your favor. Because in the beginning, you don't have a lot of data, you don't have a lot of context, your pixel isn't properly conditioned. So you need to do everything in your power to essentially boost your odds of success. Okay, so now let's actually get into how do you actually start and launch? Like, what's the actual process for getting this off the ground? So I want you to please take all of this with a grain of salt. Media buying is probably one of the most like nuanced and situational things that exist in this entire info product space. So that being said, like, do not take this as gospel. And if you want more hands-on help for running your ads, you want me to consult on your ads or run your ads myself, you can click the link down below and apply to work with me, because that's going to be a lot more helpful than just watching this Loom video that I made one time. But in general, this is how I'm launching most of my offers from the beginning if they're not already doing big numbers. So what I'll do is I'll launch like a $700 to $1,000 a day budget, and that's to a call funnel. The reason why I'm in this range is because if you start at like $200 a day and you're projecting your cost per call to be like around $200, you might have some days where you get 0 calls, you might have some days where you get 2 calls, you might have some days where you get 1 calls, and what you're seeing here is like, okay, I had a $100 cost per call today, and then the next day it was 0 because I had no calls, and the next day it was $200. So what I'm trying to do is give myself enough budget to see what a more realistic cost per call is. So like if I have $700 to $1,000 a day, that's room for around 3 to 5 booked calls, maybe a little bit more. And that way I can start to get a sense for the actual cost per call. Another thing is when you start on super low levels of spend, you're just delaying the feedback loop of you getting data. So like, let's say you launch at $250 a day and you're booking like 7 calls a week. And then of those 7 calls, 2 of them show up. All you're doing is you're making the process of getting data back take weeks instead of days and months instead of weeks. So I just like to spend a little bit more in the beginning, get more data rolling in the door, and essentially start iterating and figuring things out quicker. So in terms of the campaign structure, I'm usually doing 3 ad sets within the CBO. I'm doing warm or an interest stack, I'm doing a lookalike stack, and then broad. Within each of these ad sets, I'm going to have the same 8 to 10 creatives and then like 5 combinations of body copy, headlines, etc. And then I'm also going to have the hammer them ads set up for everyone who books a call or everyone who hits the application page. So with that being said, once you launch, what do you do? Like what's it look like after you start getting some data in? So what I'm monitoring in order, and I'm going to go down the line in terms of top of funnel to bottom of funnel. The first thing I'm monitoring is the front end metrics, like the CPMs and the click-through rates. I just want to see that these are, again, within reasonable range. If I have a click-through rate of like 0.2%, I know something's going wrong. If I have a click-through rate of like 3%, I'm like, okay, this is really good ads. The next thing I'm monitoring is the percentage of people on the page to qualified book call. Again, I want to see around 3 to 5%. The next thing that I'm looking at is the cost per call and the actual application quality. So I'm actually sitting there and like looking at the individual type form responses sometimes and just seeing like, okay, of how many people apply, how many of them are qualified, of the people who are qualified, how many of them actually book a call. So that way I can start to get a sense of like, is something going wrong in this entire application process? Like for example, I had a team that we just launched last week and like 1 in 10 people who hit the type form were qualified. I was like, okay, there's something wrong here. So we completely repositioned the whole VSL, all of the ads, all the messaging, relaunched to a whole different angle. And now, like I would say 7 out of 10 people that hit the type form are booking a call. So just little like indicators like that I'm looking at. I'm trying to get as granular as I can, especially in the beginning, just so I can really get a sense of what's going on quickly. The next thing I'm looking at is setter feedback and lead quality. And this is a heavy priority for me. Now, what I mean by that is I don't care how good the numbers look on the front end. If I'm talking to the setters and they're telling me every single lead has zero idea why they're signing up for this call, they have no idea what the business model is, like all this horrible like feedback, that doesn't really matter as much that the numbers on the front end look good because there's clearly something bigger going wrong. The next thing that I focus on, like I said, is lead quality. So we have a software that we work with called LeadFi, and I'm not going to talk about LeadFi too much in this video because I think I'm going to do a specific video about them. But essentially what LeadFi does is they give you very, very powerful financial data about every single person that comes through your funnel. So that way you're not just relying on your sales team feedback. You can have quantifiable data about your leads' buying power as soon as they come through your funnel. So I'm going to talk about this more in later videos. If you want more details about this, you can just DM me on Instagram. But LeadFi has become an absolute game changer for us. The next thing that I'm going to be looking at is the show rate. So this is a common Achilles heel. We have a bunch of pre-call processes that we use to help get the show rate up, but honestly, show rate is a really big Achilles heel for a lot of people, especially with paid traffic. So that's another thing that I'm monitoring really heavily. After that, I'm looking at the close rate. Obviously, if everything looks good up here, typically the close rate is decent because most of the teams I work with, I know that the sales team isn't a massive bottleneck. So as long as I can kind of get everything up here to work, most of my sales teams are pretty solid, and I know the close rate is going to be good, and then the ROAS. So the reason why I wanted to bring this up is so many people will like launch their ads and be like, oh bro, my ROAS isn't good. And it's like, why isn't your ROAS good? There's all of these other things that come before your ROAS. So you need to understand the root cause, not just the end result of your ROAS. So another important thing I want to talk about is that as long as the front end stats are tolerable and the lead quality is decent, I'm letting all my campaigns run for 5 to 7 days minimum before I do anything. So if I see that the cost per call is like around $200, even $250, even sometimes even $300, again, LeadFi helps a lot here because I can actually see the real qualifications of the people coming through our funnel. But as long as everything looks decent, I'm letting it ride for 5 to 7 days minimum. And I'm going to talk about the reasons why down here. So the number one reason why is just because you have to remember that if you're launching paid ads for the first time, how many people are realistically going to go and book a call the very first time that they see you? Not very many. So my point here is that like most people, unless the ads are just amazing, are not going to see one ad and be like, oh my God, I have to go watch this guy's VSL and then book a call. So what I'm trying to say is that like people usually need to be kind of eased into this. Like they'll see one ad and then they'll see a different ad that has a slightly different angle, and then they'll see a third ad, and then they'll see the 19th ad, and then it's like finally they go and book the call. So that's reason number one, is just because I understand that most people aren't going to go take action, especially on something like booking a sales call the first time they see you. So I want to be more on the side of letting things run for longer as long as the numbers on the front end are decent. And then the second thing is the concept of a look back window. So what I mean by this is essentially just understanding the sales cycles for high-ticket info products. So like I talked about in my other videos, the sales cycle for people buying a high-ticket coaching program is very often weeks, if not months, if not years. And what I mean by a look-back window is essentially, let's say I spend $30,000 on ads this month and I bring back $60,000 at the end of the month. That's a 2-to-1 ROAS. But if I wait 30 or 60 days and I go and look back at the ads that I was running this past month and I see what the ROAS is at that point, after all the people who came in during this month ended up closing a couple weeks or a couple months later down the line, my ROAS, cash on cash, after like a 30 or 60-day look back window is usually significantly higher. So what I'm trying to say is, let's say you're shooting for like a 5-to-1 ROAS, but let's say you hit like a 3-to-1 within that month. Realistically, as long as you're doing the right things with retention marketing and different things to kind of condense the sales cycle, on a 30 or 60-day look back window, your ROAS probably is going to be closer to a 5-to-1. So with that being said, it's just more so understanding that people aren't going to buy as soon as they see your ads, and most of the time people aren't even going to buy the first time that they come through your funnel. It's going to be weeks or months down the line. So you have to understand that this entire game of running paid media is a long-term focus thing, and you're building more sustainability and longevity into your offer, not just like cash on cash ROAS within a 30-day window. So in terms of next steps, I really don't want to get into next steps because, like I said, everything in this entire media buying and launching paid ads process is so nuanced. But essentially, if I had to give you a simplified version, the next steps after I run this initial test is either A, I'm going to double down and I'm going to scale this initial CBO, or I might switch the campaign to an ABO and test that at the same time. Or the second option is I'm going to pivot. So I might pivot to completely new creatives with a different messaging angle. I might pivot to new targeting. I might pivot to going back and optimizing the VSL, the landing page, and the application. I would say this is usually the more common approach in terms of if it doesn't work, this is what I'm going back and doing first, and then I'm doing step number A. But again, take this with a grain of salt because media buying is so situational and so nuanced. So like I said earlier, if you're interested in having me run your ads or consult you on your ads or teaching you how to run ads for other people, just go ahead and click the link down below and fill out the type form to apply to work with me. But I hope you guys thought that this video was valuable. Honestly, this was probably one of the better videos I've put out so far. So if you guys enjoyed it, make sure you like the video, subscribe, and I'll talk to you next time.